that of any other leader of that day, while the other leaders were begging for entry into the house of their oppressor. He was telling you to build your own house.
Welcome to the Gilchrist Experience. Actually, it's Gilchrist, and we have Culpeper here and Weatherspoon. Willie. And we're going to talk about being born and raised in Harlem with the folks. And our great Congressman, Charlie Rangel, who's a little serious note. After 40 years of service, it looks like, well, we have to see what happens with Congressman Charles Rangel. He's 80 years old, and I think President Obama gave him a hint that, you know, go out in style with a little grace and all your, good works respected. So we'll have to see. Tell me what we think.
It would be a long fight. That's what I think. From what I understand, it went back and forth this week. And I don't think he wants to take all 13 counts.
Okay.
Which is one report that I heard.
All right.
I thought it was unfortunate that this all came about, and nothing happens by happenstance.
Right.
So I believe it's a strategic move right now.
The right wingers.
To just dismantle and kind of dilute the political base. Absolutely. You know.
Well, you've got to look at the way that the president himself is being treated.
Exactly.
By,
okay.
The political forces.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, the question keeps coming up, does that have anything to do with race? Everything has to do with race.
Of course.
In this country. And also I remember my mother told us when we were growing up, forget about what you see them do. You can't do what they do. So you cannot, he could not expect to be treated the same way, especially going back 42 years when Adam Clayton Powell was the congressman. And we saw the way in which he was being treated.
Because he was too powerful.
And also by even some of the constituency of Harlem. So it's interesting that chickens continue to come home to roost.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But, you know, Adam fought it. He was censured. He was reelected. But there are people looking to fill this seat as we speak.
I think that's the unfortunate part, too, that all these years, I don't know that he's really groomed someone to take his place.
Well, you know, that's the problem.
And Clayton
That's
Powell
a big
Jr.
problem with the Democratic Party in New York. People come into office and they think that the seat belongs to them. They're not really about true service. They don't groom individuals to follow them. So, first of all, no one should be sitting in a congressional seat for 40 years. Not at all. I don't care who they are. I don't care what state or community, shouldn't be in a seat for 40 years. You come in, you should bring some innovative moves with you, spend a period of time, step out.
I agree.
Train some young people to come in. Then maybe at a later time you might want to come back. But when you have a seat for 40 years, God forbid, you just suddenly die. Who is prepared to fill that seat?
Exactly.
Who has been trained and mentored to fill the seat?
After 40 years, look at the important position he was in. The Ways and Means Committee. I mean, all that power. I would think if he stepped down from that position, they would leave him alone, since he was 80 years old, right? They wanted his power. They wanted to strip him of his power. They did that. To be gracious to any congressman, I mean, I would think they'd bypass the rest of it. What do you had 4 rent-stabilized apartments. When he first got those apartments, they were worth nothing. Probably. How long has he had those apartments? 20 years at least?
Oh, I don't know, but
Right.
in the true sense of it all, I don't know who's living in those apartments. I don't know if they're just utilized by him, or if he was gracious enough to say to somebody, would you like to use this apartment? Although his name is on the lease and you provide housing for somebody,
family or
that would be a
something?
noble gesture. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Okay.
You know, they did discuss the issue of his taxes last year and whether or not he was using any office space in one of the apartments.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, the property
That
in
came
the
up,
Dominican
this question.
Republic. Again, when you step into that arena, you're an open book. You are, the bullseye is on you. It's on your front and it's on your back. So you have to walk circumspect and you have to dot every I, cross every T. And if you get nailed for something you shouldn't have been doing, you can't blame anybody. Anybody in public office knows that, you know, they're going to be a target for somebody, even
about-
if it's falsely accused.
How about Congressman Waters? What is she accused of? Anybody know?
Well,
I haven't heard.
when the TARP money was going out to save the banks,
Oh, she went and helped
Her
her
husband's
bank.
bank
Right.
was
right,
one of the
okay.
banks in California that was looking for federal assistance. Now, I don't think she's going to have a problem with it because there were numerous banks that they were funding out. I think his bank got something like $15 million or something like that.
And he's what at the bank?
He's the president of he's the CEO or the president of the board, something like that.
Okay.
But this is not nepotism, and you know, this is not a conflict of interest that I see. He's had this. He's been on this board or with this bank for some period of time.
Okay.
Let's look at the banks that got money. Let's look at Chase.
Right.
Let's look at
Citibank,
Citibank,
Bank of America.
Bank of America. Then you got these brokerage houses that got all this money down on Wall Street. What are we talking about here? What are we talking about? Let's look at the people that came from Morgan Stanley that are sitting in the White House now, running
right.
finance for the
Right.
government.
Absolutely.
Right. So this is a,
Sat on
a community
boards.
bank
This
that her
was
husband.
a black community bank.
Okay. All right.
Now we remember years ago we had two black savings and loans in New York. You had Carver and you had Freedom. Freedom was not allowed to stay afloat, and Freedom was funded through Chase Manhattan Bank, if I remember correctly.
Is that right?
But they did not save Freedom National, and Freedom went under, right? So here's a black bank out on the West Coast, which is trying to get TARP money, just like all these big banks got, and they got billions of dollars, and they're squawking about some little black
Right.
bank that got
15.
$15 million.
Once again, it sounds very strategically dismantling the power of.
You know what
the
amazes
base.
me about all this right-wing stuff? I mean, wherever you look, between Palin and the rest of them,
Tea Party.
the Tea Party, all of them. I mean, anybody with any rational sense. I mean, if your senses are anywhere in tune, you can see the lunacy of these people. And why are they being so propped up by the media?
Well,
that's
that's the
because
key.
the media is working.
Is-
Who is the media working
Okay.
for?
And look at, we have no voice. What's his name? Rush Limbaugh. He's on 5 days a week. You know, he has a platform
Right.
where he can talk and he can elaborate and he can speak every day on an issue.
Right.
Black Talk Radio, after the Million Man March, Black Talk Radio, what little that was left, was totally dismantled by design. Because what happened was the major media did not support the Million Man March. And what happened? Over 1 million men showed up,
Well over a million.
well over 1 million. And it's like, wait a minute, who sanctioned this? I thought y'all had control.
Right.
And then they found out that it was a Black Talk Radio. It wasn't the major TV stations. It wasn't even the major radio stations, because they were playing music and they were still doing their little fun stuff, make you laugh in the morning, ha. But they weren't being serious and they weren't supporting it. And now it's gone. So
Look at
we have no
WLIB.
voice.
LIB was
Same thing.
taken out of the loop. And there are black-owned radio stations are dying every month across the country. Rupert Murdoch, a very dangerous individual, not just because of what he did regarding Fox TV and Obama and the cartoons, but what he has done in New York is that he has gone across the city and bought up the community newspapers that you pick up in the supermarket. There are different community newspapers. There are about 13. Courier Life. He bought up Courier Life in Brooklyn. They had about 14 newspapers that they published between the Black, Latino, Russian, and Jewish communities. Okay. He bought up Caribbean Life. He owns that.
Caribbean Life he bought?
Rupert Murdoch bought.
Wow.
He bought that entire package.
That's Fox News.
Fox. He owns Fox. Okay? And part of the problem here is that a guy named Powell, the son of Colin Powell, I think his name is Michael, was the FCC director, who allowed Murdoch the right as a foreigner, not a citizen, but as a foreigner, to expand his media empire. When there were laws against that, they gave him a waiver. Michael Powell gave him a waiver, which allowed him in the late 80s to expand his empire. Okay. So he not only owns television stations, he owns newspapers, he owns magazines, and he's looking to expand his control. And keep in mind, now corporations can get involved in political campaigns.
On the news today, they were talking about the Carlyle Group having $1.8 trillion sitting on it, waiting to see what's going to happen with these financial improvements or regulations, and that they were worried about which way the Bush tax cuts were going to go. Now, here's the lunacy that I see in all this right-wing garbage that they talk all the time, is that if you charge less tax, or if the rich people don't pay any taxes, they will put out money to give you jobs. They will stimulate the economy instead of putting the economy further in the ditch. All right? Obama's explaining as, don't give them the keys to the car back. He's saying, they drove us into a ditch once. Be careful. Don't give them the keys back. All right? Which is a beautiful analogy. It's humorous, and it shows how cool he is about everything. He's trying to show people that, I mean, you really going to look at these idiots and give them back the keys to the car when you see where they put us now? So this Bush tax cut that's ruined the country as it is. I mean, go down memory lane about the Bush family and all the atrocities that they've performed for us in 8 years. Oh, I would even like to go back to the grandfather.
Okay.
Now, I'll just give you a little idea of what we do on the Gilchrist experience in the last 10 years. Graham and I went through a whole thing back at 9/11. 9/11 was caused by the Mossad and the Bush family and the Australian mafia, which was the owner of the Twin Towers. Now this is
where the disclaimer runs across the bottom of the screen.
No. Now I must commend Manhattan Neighborhood Network for the beauty of being able to say all this stuff on MNN. And this is one thing that you must realize. I mean, I'm on television because it's public, and I can say what I want to say. So we try to give you the truth. So I just want to remind you who's responsible for all these wars and 9/11. All right? I see it as plain as day. Graham, I've done, and you've watched us over the years, you know we do the real deal here. The CIA is involved, and the Mossad, the Israeli Mossad, they had a trucking company on the 3rd, 4th floor. They moved out two weeks before the building fell, all right? The building was insured 6 months for how many billions of dollars?
Billions of dollars. By,
all right?
Matter of fact, he's building a new building right across the street.
From
at Church and
what was his name? Silverstein.
Silverstein. He's putting up a new building right on Church Street, across from the post office down on Murray Street or Barclay Street.
All right.
It's got a brand new building going up there. It's taking up half of the block. So, what was your point?
My point was that the Mossad's involved, an Australian Jew, Silverstein.
Once again, well, you know what? Let me just interrupt you to say what we talked about before. The media was
media,
allowed
right.
to paint this picture. Very much reminds me of the movie Wag the Dog.
Right. Exactly.
You know, excuse me. Whatever you create,
Right. I'm just trying to show the public how we've been bamboozled by the Bush family.
Absolutely.
And going back to, you know, Bush stealing 2 elections, we have all these questions. And then you say, and Obama's going back and reminding you how Bush and his family ran us into a ditch. All right?
Matter of fact, Neil, who you never see,
Savings and loan.
who was the orchestrator of the savings and loan scandal,
Right?
bankrupt hundreds of thousands of Southern farmers.
That's right.
Then he went to China,
Right.
orchestrated all these deals with China over the last 10 years. China now owns more of the United States than the United States owns. A large portion of our debt is covered by the Chinese. If the Chinese decide to call the note Oma, that's Cantonese for hello. That'll be the language you'll be speaking. So Neil has been overseas orchestrating the financial wellness or undermining of the United States.
Right. Exactly.
While China is involved in crimes against humanity, they're in Africa, raping the continent of its mineral resources, of its lumber.
Right.
They come in to various parts of Africa to build. They don't employ any Africans at all. They bring their own people, and for compensation, they're looking for the mineral wealth of the continent. They're also in the Congo, too.
Right. We made a show about the Congo.
And that's why the U.S. says nothing to the Chinese. So Bush, his family, the father, back in the early 60s, and when they were switching the gasoline to unleaded, the Bush family on the commodities exchange bought up most of the minerals used to produce unleaded gasoline.
Okay. All right.
If you look at BP, situation in the Gulf, you see this retired admiral that's always on the news now.
Right.
You'll see him on their payroll soon enough, probably. But no one has done the research on the collaborative efforts between BP and the United States government.
Which is British Petroleum in the 20s.
British Petroleum.
Which they were in Iran.
Which is, precisely. In the early 1950s, BP went into Persia to start drilling operations. The Persian government nationalized their oil fields and said, you can't have it. BP, the great white father, the British Empire, they didn't go back home. BP came here. Excuse me. Met with the CIA to strike a deal to have the government of Persia overthrown, which the U.S. facilitated. They changed the name from Persia to Iran, put in a puppet state which allowed BP to come back and drill for oil, which is the same thing we have done in Afghanistan and are doing in Afghanistan today. Put in a puppet state with Karzai, who worked under Halliburton for Dick Cheney.
Oh, Dick Cheney. Aha, there rings a bell.
Back together,
And our sons and daughters are getting shot up and killed over there only because the Russians were trying to get into Afghanistan 20, 25 years ago because Afghanistan has more natural gas and oil than all of Saudi Arabia. We went over to keep the Russians out under the pretext of getting in there to run the pipelines, which we have already built from Afghanistan out to the Middle East through Israel. So we helped bin Laden, and then we turned on bin Laden.
I was just going to bring up bin Laden. And he fought and kicked the Russians out of Afghanistan.
Precisely, which is just, you got to connect the dots. And the people don't study history.
Right.
Indochina, Vietnam, the French were in there. After the French got their can kicked, the U.S. went in there. There was more rice being grown. And you can go back and look, and you will find that every hawk state in the United States was a rice-growing state. Louisiana, Texas, Alabama, Mississippi, all the states that grow rice were hawk states. And the U.S. was producing more rice. Indochina was prior to. But by collapsing that government and their economy, our rice production was allowed to increase. Everything is about money.
This is why we need the Freedom Party.
Exactly.
Ah.
That's why we're
You
supposed
know?
to have.
That's right.
That's why we're
Because-
going to have Charles Barron on next
Yes.
week as soon as possible. Well, I just wanted to go back to 9/11 since you mentioned Cheney. Now I just have this image of Cheney sitting in a bunker somewhere, warning the Air Force to stay away from these planes that are coming in. Now everybody wondered what happened to the Air Force during 9/11. What were they doing? They were playing war games. They were off in Canada, chasing MiGs, saying, you know, because we have a piece where we show operators talking about, is this a game or is this real? When they found out that the planes were about to hit the World Trade Center. So I can imagine Cheney in this bunker telling the planes, back off. Because the plane didn't hit the Pentagon.
Not at all.
That was a missile. You saw no rubbish, no
fuselage,
no wings, no nothing outside. It was a skid there, and obviously it was something. It's all planned. I mean, anybody that doesn't know that 9/11 was an inside job, something's wrong with your brain. But you have to look at it. A building has never fallen due to fire in the history of the planet.
Not a steel structure.
Not a steel structure. And what was in Building 7, which collapsed 6 hours after the attack? Huh? CIA records, Enron records, all this stuff.
How convenient.
Isn't that something? And somebody was on record as
Like
saying
orchestrated.
Giuliani was supposed to have been a witness to the firemen telling, pull it.
The building was pulled.
It
That
was
building
pulled.
had that collapsed.
It wasn't
Building 7
touched.
had nothing to do with the
Come on.
airplanes.
Anybody in their right mind can't see writing on the wall?
No,
And the
because people
Mossad,
are so
Israeli government?
conditioned. As a people, as a society, we are so conditioned to turn on the TV and have someone tell us how to think, what to think, present us with information, and say these are the facts. And people believe it. They read it. They see it in print. See a little AP in front of it. Okay, these are the facts. And folks don't always think, and they certainly don't do their own research.
Well, you know, Alton Maddox talks about this all the time, about the inability of people to think critically and analytically. And people don't know how to do that. So once you...
And they don't teach it
They
in
don't teach
public
it. They're not
schools
gonna
either.
teach it.
Right,
Let's
Thank
be
you.
clear.
So once
They
you
don't.
see
You got to pay
something,
$40,000
your
a
mind
year.
runs with it. You know, there was the clip of the people in Palestine with rifles jumping up and down at 9/11. I said to my wife, I said, that's a bogus clip. She said, what do you mean? I said, it's night. The sun is setting over there. Look where the shadows are. That's an old footage clip. And they had to come back later. Amy Goodman mentioned it on WBAI and Democracy Now! How they caught the media in throwing gasoline on the flame
Right.
by showing this clip of Palestinians jumping up and down. Again, because, why? Because we're going to have to go after these Muslims.
Right.
So you show a clip of Middle Easterners with rifles. The clip that they showed had nothing to do with 9/11. It was file footage that they extracted. Then they show you this picture of Atta in the airport terminal. Oh, there's Atta. You don't know when that picture was taken. You don't know when it was taken. You don't know if it is Atta. And then they turn around and hand you a piece of paper and say, oh, we found his passport on the street. We have human bodies with greater density than a passport, and the bodies have not been found.
That's
They were incinerated in 2,000 plus degree heat. But the government is going to tell you that they found Atta's passport on the ground.
Obviously, it's some minor
Intact.
plan.
And someone listening to that will believe it.
Of course. How is the next day they had all the pictures of everybody? Everybody is from Saudi Arabia. And Saudi Arabia and the Bush family have been...
For decades.
For what, 30 years?
Dick Gregory speaks about that. I've heard him talk where he says, you ever notice when there's some type of event that happens, some catastrophe, and it could happen at 11 o'clock in the morning. And by the 6 o'clock news. They know who that person's first grade teacher was.
Mm-hmm.
They'll know where they live. They know every single thing about this person.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, do you think they just started compiling this at that moment?
Of course not.
So
It's all set up.
very, yeah, it's all very
Well, being in
orchestrated.
TV production, you can see how it's done. Because we've done enough shows on what's happening, and we see it a different view. Matter of fact, the day of 9/11, I was listening to the newscasters, and the newscasters were talking about explosions. The firemen were talking about explosions. And the following day, all those clips and all that information was gathered up by the CIA or whoever, and you never heard any more
Yeah.
about it.
I'm sure they got a memo said, don't use the word explosion, you know, or
But you
incendiary
had firefighters
devices.
that have even produced their own documentaries. on
Yeah.
this. Captains and such, you see,
Right.
because they realize how city workers were used to perpetuate or victimize,
Right,
along with the civilians,
right.
were victimized to propel this agenda of going after Muslims and all this other stuff.
Right,
The captains have said they heard the detonation charges.
right.
They saw the steel with the blast marks on the steel. Now, I was at Ground Zero. They said you couldn't take pictures, ha ha ha, because it was a federal crime scene. What federal crime scene has not been photographed? But they didn't want it getting out that the white blast, the white marks from the explosions were on the steel. And then, if this is a federal crime scene, you should be looking to gather evidence. All the steel
Was shipped off?
was shipped into Jersey and melted down. You had private corporations, I'm sure you had the mob and everybody else in there
Sure. Oh, yeah.
shipping steel to be melted down. If this was a crime scene, every piece of steel from that building should have been mapped out and laid out so they could reconstruct this building. That wasn't what they were going to do.
That's right.
That building could not fall straight down. Impossible. The compromised area was up around the 86th floor or something like that. It takes 2 hours for that steel to be compromised. The buildings, both buildings were down in less than 2 hours. So if nothing is going on here, there's no fire from 85 down, why does the building fall down? If the upper area is compromised, if that steel was so compromised, if it had buckled, the upper portion of the building would have tipped
Tilted,
over.
yeah.
Right.
It wouldn't have fallen
It
off.
imploded and came down.
It would not have
Stacked.
fallen off, nor would the building have collapsed.
Right.
You've seen buildings detonated. You see on the news, oh, today they blew up such and such a building. It came down the same way.
Same way. And on that morning, commentators were saying exactly that. This reminds me of an implosion. I mean, this is a demolition.
Right.
You know, and there was no doubt about it. How is it possible for that to happen? Now, why did they do it?
That's
Of course, to start a war. Now we go to weapons of mass destruction.
Or
Another
as,
lie.
as Imhotep Gary Bird says, weapons of mass distraction. It's like
You know?
it was just to distract
Whoa.
See, when
us.
you get people,
and
you
don't-
get people on this
Whoa.
bandwagon.
Yeah, let's
saw
go
a
get
guy-
them, and God bless America
No.
and kill everybody else.
Yeah.
I
you
saw
know?
a guy with a van. He had this big American flag on it on Atlantic Avenue in Bed-Stuy. I said, hey, brother, what's up with the flag? Oh, they did. They who? Who was they?
Yeah.
Oh, the Muslims. I said, what do you know about the Muslims doing anything? What do
Right.
you know?
Right.
I said, did you have that flag on your truck when they gunned down Amadou Diallo a few years ago? Huh? Did you have your flag on your truck? No, but all of a sudden now, they said somebody did something. Like
Right.
the Indians took scalps when it was the white man scalping the Indians. I said, you don't even know what you're supporting.
Right. Right.
You're caught up in the hype, just like now they want to build a mosque downtown. What's the problem? You see, if you can't build a mosque, there shouldn't be a church there. There shouldn't be a synagogue. There shouldn't be a Buddhist. There shouldn't be anything down there. Because my father and grandfather ambushed the Ku Klux Klan in Georgia, and they claimed to be Christians. So there shouldn't be a church down there either. There are all kinds of religious extremists.
There's a real terrorist.
Precisely. The Ku
You
Klux
imagine
Klan.
being Christian and these guys with white hoods go burn a cross
And
on your
put
lawn.
a cross. My pastor had a cross burned on his front yard in Long Island.
Now, what kind of terrorist is that?
And you're worrying about,
Whoa.
you want to say they can't build a mosque? What is the problem? What, there were Muslims that died there? And Islam does not support radical behavior. Anything to the extreme is wrong.
You know, I would think any Southerner, such as most of these Southerners are headed in the Republican Party, think of going back. They're old enough to remember. If I'm old enough to remember these things, they're old enough to remember how white people terrorized blacks in the South. I mean, you can't imagine. I imagine going to church every Sunday and then seeing somebody burn a Jesus Christ or a cross onto my lawn. All right? Now, what kind of terror does that put in your heart?
You have
they're
terrorism
supposed to
going
be
on right here in
Christians.
Harlem in the 32nd precinct.
Oh, yeah.
I've been spending a lot of time up here with the family on 132nd Street. Their 4 sons have been beat up, brutalized, hospitalized by cops from the 32nd precinct.
Whoa. That's
And
135th
they have
Street.
summarily been told by the inspector, if you don't like it, get out of, leave. This is the man that owns a 12-unit apartment building. This isn't some welfare recipient, immigrant. He is an immigrant. He's from Jamaica.
Okay.
All right. His sons were out on the street. They messed up. They were selling some reefer or whatever a couple
Okay.
years ago. They're on probation. But there's stuff going on that they want these boys to collaborate, and they're not involved. They're going to school. They want to mind their business, but the cops have come into their apartment, beat them up in their apartment, beat them in front of neighbors, beat them on the street. All right, and the emotional trauma that these boys and even their grandmother was brutalized. Their grandmother was brutalized. She's wearing a neck brace right now by these cops. They've been cursed at. The mother has been cursed at. All sorts of things over the last month. Now the trauma that they're going through, they've got to get professional counseling. One of the sons is going back to court. There's all kinds of stuff going on up here in Harlem, and everything's like hush hush.
Fantastic. And that's 2010.
2010.
With a black president.
July 2010, precisely.
All right.
And nothing has changed but the date on the calendar. That's the only thing that's changed. Some of the players may have changed, but the program is the same.
And once again, there's no outlet where you hear this. With syndicated radio stations, you have stations that, it is what it is. I think it would be okay if that is not all that we had. We have so few local stations, and the ones that we do have don't spend a lot of time doing the news.
No.
They have
Everybody's syndicated now. That's the problem.
30-second news briefs, and for the most part, they think we just want to hear music and dance and laugh, and be told the time and what time and how to get to work.
Today they're talking about this crazy girl that went to prison for 2 weeks. They locked her up in California.
Oh, Logan, how is that
Lohan.
news?
I mean,
Lindsay
what
Lohan.
the heck?
Who
All right, now she's
cares?
taking notes. She's going to write a book. Please, get out of here. Piss and vinegar to that. What are you talking about? That is not news. This girl has her
piss and
problems.
vinegar.
Let her go get the help she needs. She is not important.
Yeah.
She is not news. Entertainers are not news. Sports people are not news.
Once again, when the news media wants you to be distracted, that's the kind of stuff they throw in your face. And bet your last dollar that buried somewhere on page 6, there's a news article about this big that tells the real what's going on. Why everybody's all over here. Anything having to do with sex, money, and somebody sleeping with somebody they're not supposed to be. When that's on the front page, the real news is being buried. So
They got the
that's-
people now going back to get mussels and clams down in the Gulf. You'd have to be out of your cotton picking mind. People are swimming in that water. Oh, the oil disappeared. We don't know where it went. The
Now
oil
they're
was
saying
there.
that now they're saying the chemicals they use to
The
clean up are more toxic
Toxic.
Yeah.
than the
That's-
oil
that's a
itself.
fact. That's a
The
fact.
Cortex
As if we didn't know
was
that.
banned
though.
in Britain. It was banned in Britain. They can't use it there.
Right.
But they use it here.
Exactly.
The Mexican government is now suing BP, by the way.
Oh.
As of today, they're
Good for
suing
Really?
BP. Yes.
Okay.
But the fact that you cannot see the oil in the water doesn't mean it's not there. And a number of things we have to look at because the ecosystem. You have in the first 10 to 16 feet of seawater, you have what's called phytoplankton. Those are microscopic creatures that live in the water. They are the base of the food chain for the entire ocean.
That's right.
If there are no plankton in the first 16 feet of seawater, everything dies.
Yeah.
Because the small fish and other creatures have nothing to eat on, which means the larger predatory fish have nothing to eat. They all die. The Gulf, a massive area, the massive area that it is, a lot of it is going to become a dead zone.
Well, you know what? We touched upon this last week, and in the video, the documentary Food Inc., it was produced in 2006, and in that they had the aerial shot of the Gulf, which already said it was dead. So perhaps this is a way to justify, to say, okay, this is the reason it's dead. Well, guess what? They've been the manufacturers and all of those companies have been factories throwing that toxin in the Mississippi for years.
Yeah.
So that
Right.
water has been dead. The ecosystem has been dead. So now this is a way to cover up and say this is why it's dead.
See,
But the imbalance is going to be here, I would say, for
a
hundreds of
long,
years.
long time.
It
And people
cannot
are
be
saying,
corrected.
oh, it's good. You know, the fish is good. The oysters are good, and they're eating them. Don't get caught with that stupidity. You are not to trust the FDA. You are not to trust the EPA. EPA lied to the people at Ground Zero and said the air quality was
Right.
good. Christy Todd Whitman.
Oh,
she should
God.
have been brought up on criminal charges because she knew it was a lie.
How do people get away
She,
with this?
you know, and this is the thing. It's all about money. It's about making. They want these fishermen to make money. Everybody wants to make money. They don't care if they're damning their body. They don't care if they're damning their children and their grandchildren. It's all about the here and now and the money. So the EPA is going to say, "Oh, this is okay. That's okay." How is it that they were even running that operation with no permit from the EPA? See, the collusion between BP and the U.S. government,
Well, it's
and
got-
nobody is challenged. Nobody is asking the
it
right
all
questions.
goes back to the Illuminati, the Carlyle Group, and the Bush family. We haven't even talked about his grandfather and the Nazis. We
You mean
go
good
all-
Prescott?
Yeah, Prescott
Bush.
Senator Prescott Bush. We go all the way back there to Grandpa. His grandfather helps supply raw materials to Nazi Germany from 1939 to 1944. Then they shut him down to 44. Mind you, the grandfather of your
A
ex-president.
U.S. senator,
You know?
collaborating with the enemy.
All right? Now, yeah, Brown and something.
Brown and Root.
Brown and Root, right?
You had Brown and Root, and you got to follow. See, Halliburton,
Yeah, let's get to them. Ooh.
Brown and Root.
Oh, boy.
Then you've got
Cheney. Wow.
it's KBR. That's the new name. Kellogg Brown and Root. KBR. You've got
Is
Halliburton.
that from Brown and Root?
Yeah, that's the same.
Oh,
These are
same
all
line.
the same people. They
Okay.
just keep changing the name around.
Right,
But
okay.
it's the same people. The Carlyle Group is comprised. The Carlyle Group was founded at the Carlyle Hotel
Right.
in Manhattan
Right,
on
right,
Madison.
Right,
Avenue.
right.
Powerful
How far-
people.
Right.
And you will find that all of your secretaries of defense in the last 30, 40 years have been members of the Carlyle Group.
Which is Illuminati,
Illuminati.
secret
Yep.
societies.
They have major contracts. What they do, they handle most of the defense contracts for countries across the globe.
Across the globe, right? So war is good for this
And
country.
they're making money. I bet you if you check, you'll
strategically
find
planned
that-
based on the economy.
Right.
It's
They're
like,
not
oh, we
only
need a
making
war.
money
It's
off
time.
the U.S. government,
It's a
but they're
cyclical
making money off the
cycle.
Iranian government. They're making money off the Afghan government and the Pakistan government. Because
And the
they
Israeli
supply
government.
military arms to all of these
Right,
countries.
right.
Wow.
And
Colin
one plane
Powell
is
is a
what,
member
billions
of
of
the
dollars
Carlyle
for
Group.
one plane? Come on.
Well, you can all bring it all back to weapons of mass destruction. By election time 2004, we found out that was a lie. But you would think that America will wake up and elect a new president. But what were our choices? You had two guys running from Skull and Bones for president. This is another secret society out of Yale.
Right.
All right? Now they're running against each other, and what happens? Bush steals the second election. All right? Now what happens? What that? Whoa.
Al Gore didn't even put up a big stink about
No.
it.
He was part of the scheme.
They probably said, if you do that, then we'll do this. Understand, like Dick said,
How can you find it?
there's a file. And if you dig deep enough in anybody, you're going to come up with some stuff.
Mhm.
So you have the file ready, and when you get out of line, it's like a massage therapist, you know, or your babysitter, whatever the case may be, or, you know, you ordered some Victoria's Secrets, sir. Would you
Now
like
we-
that to come out, Hoover?
Hey.
What are you wearing right now? You know?
So it's
If we can pass on
wag
this
the
information,
dog, you know.
I mean, come on. How many other people know this? How many people know this?
But they're not on the 6 o'clock news and not on
No.
Good Morning America saying, hey, good morning, guess what happened in your world last night?
You know, you can see Clinton and Bush working together collaboratively the last few years.
Mm-hmm.
And you say, wow, you know, these two guys politically, there's no real difference between Democrats and Republicans.
Of
Just
course
a few minor things. But the relationship between Clinton and Bush, Herbert Walker Bush, they collaborated on a number of things before Clinton came to the White House.
Right.
And if you get a good book, there's a good book called Clinton Compromised. Compromised. Clinton, Bush, and the CIA.
Wow.
I'll say read that book for starters. I give you a list as we go week to
Okay.
week. When that book came out, I went to Barnes and Noble to get it. They said, "Oh, you can't get that book." I said, "I can't get it." "Oh no, they're not letting that book out."
Fahrenheit 451 here.
Why? Why weren't they letting it out?
Wow.
Because it gave you the history of Clinton and Bush going back over the years. When Clinton was a governor in Arkansas, when they had the rebels in South America, the funding of the rebels
With the guns?
with the guns, and the government said to Bush, "We ain't giving you any more money for this." And how did Clinton get
Guns
the
for
money?
coke, what?
The cocaine.
Right.
And it was flown into Arkansas. Clinton was the governor.
Right.
The Arkansas State Police offloaded the cocaine. The munition plants to make the guns were in Arkansas. They put the weapons on. The cocaine was distributed as crack across the country. We had 2,000 homicides in New York thanks to the stuff that Clinton and Bush were doing. That was just in New York. If you read this book, Charlie Rangel, because you brought Clinton to Harlem, read the book, you'll see what you have done to this community, not just before Clinton got here, but since he got here. All right? And he was such a good boy, he got the White House as a result. Clinton compromised. Clinton, Bush, and the CIA. I can't remember the author's name.
Isn't he part of the Carlyle group?
Yeah.
Okay.
But it goes into the deaths of people who stumbled across this munitions plant in Arkansas. They killed 2 white boys who stumbled across this place in Arkansas. They said they got hit by the train.
I was going to say, if anything ever happens to 3 of us, let this document.
There's no accident.
No, right. No suicide notes will
families-
be found.
The families of the boys who were murdered to this day, and these are 2 white kids that were murdered, they have been trying to get justice for their sons who stumbled upon the cocaine operation in Mena, Arkansas. But and you got to remember, you don't put the head of your assassination squad into the White House. Herbert Walker Bush was the head of the CIA.
And look what happened to Reagan. We did a show on that, where Reagan was almost assassinated by Bush. I mean, you got to remember, Bush in 1980 ran against Reagan in the primaries, the Republican primaries. Bush is the one that came up with voodoo economics, which we all remember, right? This was Reagan. And that's what started the whole Republican overturn of America. Really, from then on, after Carter, you got Reagan in there, and that's, America disappeared. It was land of greed and self-centeredness. You know, all of the 80s was nothing but a slaughter of our rights.
At the time of the Kennedy assassination, There were a number of future presidents in Dallas that day.
Ah.
I was watching a document, and one of them is supposed to have been Herbert Walker. I got
That's
to go
right.
back.
He was in the CIA at the time.
I got to go back and find that tape.
He was in the CIA at the time.
In
Was he?
'63, I don't think he was not in '63. No,
He doesn't go back that far?
not with the CIA. I don't think so.
Okay.
But
But he was big in oil.
oh yeah, oh yeah,
He's always been an oil man.
that was his home state.
Was he
So,
working with
for
Saudi
him-
Arabia back then?
I don't think he was in Saudi Arabia. No,
Well, he had been in Saudi Arabia 30, 40 years, wasn't he?
I don't know.
I saw that in a documentary.
I'm not sure.
Put a disclaimer on the bottom.
Yeah,
Mm.
please. Run a disclaimer.
Well, I said something wrong. I say a lot of things wrong, but my colleagues here sort of correct me every now and then.
Call Papa.
So right.
Go,
So
Papa. Well, we all
so from
British
here
you know.
now. So
We're
what do
working
we
for
do?
BP.
what do we do?
We're English.
How do we
folk.
correct this?
Whoa.
How do we correct it?
How do we reverse it? How do we correct it?
We
Do
gotta
we
pray.
just
We gotta pray for Obama.
We got to pray for everybody.
We have to
Well,
follow
We've
his
been
lead.
praying
It
and
would-
politicking
it'll take
for
more
hundreds of years,
than
and I
Obama.
don't know.
Obama can't fix this.
You know what I say about? I use the analogy. You know, growing up in New York, back in the day, I used to frequent the clubs.
Mm-hmm.
You know, something that you go through as a
Party girl.
teenager.
Aye.
Yeah, but I worked, so that's another story.
Amen.
But
Everybody worked back in the day.
no, I worked at the clubs.
Oh, you worked
Yeah,
at the club.
Oh,
yeah.
you worked at the club. Oh, that's
Explain
even
that.
better.
Explain that now,
Oh.
because people might get the
Just
wrong
help
idea.
with marketing and PR. I would make sure that they do their.
Not a go-go girl in that line?
No, I'm afraid not.
That's what I wanted
That wasn't
you
my
to- I
thing.
wanted
Go,
you to
Pepper,
define
go,
it.
Yeah.
go, girl.
Go reel you back in. Come
Go
on, guys.
behind.
No, but we always knew when a club was going out of business because they let us in on a particular night, and the pattern never ceased.
Make that
The parrot, the red parrot, was on 57th Street. They
Oh, yeah, I
turned it
remember
into
that.
a skating rink, and then they turned it into something. And when they finally gave us a black night, closed down. And you could look at every club.
Studio
So
54.
I say that with the presidency, it's like,
That's
they
right.
gave the brother
Well-
the White House. We getting ready to go out.
When we talked
It's
about
over.
when we talked about Bush in
New World Order.
204, the New World Order,
New World
which his
Order.
daddy started, actually.
No.
There'll be one money. There'll be
No.
one world. There'll be.
That's the
He
call.
didn't
That's the
start it.
Illuminati,
He didn't start
Illuminati?
it. He spoke of it, but he didn't start it.
and that was 1990.
1936, 37, the Secretary of the Treasury had Novus Ordo Secularum placed on the transverse of the dollar bill.
Mm-hmm.
That was under Teddy Roosevelt. It's on there. Look at around
Masonic
the
or-
pyramid. It says
Masonic
Novus
order.
Order Secularum.
Masonic.
No, it's New World Order. That's Latin.
Well,
It's been on the dollar bill since
Masonic.
the 30s. Well, the Masonic is one thing, but the Masonics are not running
Illuminati?
the world. They're not running the world. No, they're not running.
or is it Carlyle Group is what?
Well, you got to look
Illuminati?
at the Illuminati, the Bilderbergs.
Yeah.
You got to look at the House of Rothschild
I was going to
Okay.
say.
and their
that's the
control of the.
Rothschilds.
You got to realize
Diamond.
that
Okay.
the banks of this country. We have had depressions in this country that were brought on by bankers
Right.
intentionally.
Right.
When Jefferson, I think it was Jefferson was president, he was threatened by a banker. They had a depression because they wanted to bring the federal bank in, the Federal Reserve.
Okay.
And a lot of people don't know it's not part of the government, which it is
Right.
not. It's just
Right,
a
it's
group of
private.
families that control that.
Okay.
And you can't even get the names of those families that are in that bank. You can't get that information. But they control the banking system. But Jefferson said no, and I can't remember who the guy's name was, but he caused a depression in the United States back in the 1800s. So these guys are serious. You know, it's all about the money. It's not about patriotism. Halliburton and Cheney, these people are not Americans. They put the flag. They don't care about the flag. It's about the money. Halliburton's world headquarters is in Dubai.
That's right.
They had U.S. military guarding the land where they were building their world. U.S. military was guarding the land.
You might as well we might as well coordinate this whole effort to bring us up to 206 and then to 208 and maybe even with BP in the spill to find out that Halliburton was involved with the BP spill.
Right, in the construction, in the pouring of the cement.
There's Cheney again. Cheney in the game, involved with the spill in the Gulf. So, I mean, it all relates to the beginning of all this with the Bush family in 2001 and 9/11 to weapons of mass destruction, the theft of the second election in 2004 with 2 Skull and Bones running.
Well, isn't it a requirement that
What?
the president be a member of these?
Well, that's where we're
one
going to
or
get to
two of the
Obama. Now, why is he in there?
Yeah, I don't know. Did they let him in at
He's
some
not a
point?
blessing from God, as we all felt. I mean, anything better than Bush is a blessing from God. You know, that was my revelation.
What were you
I
about
thought,
to say?
Thank you,
Yeah,
God.
time will
I was
tell.
thinking of something else relative to this situation in Arizona with the Mexicans. You know,
Right.
the storm that's come up from that. The same thing is going on in Israel.
Right.
Israelis are expatriating children
that were born in
that were born in Israel, but are children of
Palestinians.
Arabs and Palestinians. They're sending the children out of Israel. These people, they're real racist. These people, they are what is called Zionists.
Yeah.
And this is the thing that Ahmadinejad, this is his contention. He said, I don't hate Jews. I hate Zionists. I hate Zionism.
We've been
And the two are not synonymous. They're
Right.
not. But they are sending, I think, 800 children who have never been outside of Palestine, outside of Israel. They're shipping them over the border to Egypt. This is not being reported in the American press.
Wow.
But the Jews have gone beyond what's going on in Arizona. We
Really?
haven't shipped anybody out. These children were born here, and the Israelis are sending them back into Egypt.
There's another travesty. Of course, you remember the shows we've done in Jews Against Zionism. And we're going to get Rabbi Weiss and his information back on the show. I'm sorry we've run out of time. See what happens when they're having fun? We're any closing remarks? We've got about 2 minutes.
As I said last week,
Well,
all
what have
barbaric.
you now
The whole
Graham, have I
thing.
been which one?
I said we're all just barbarianism,
Barbarian.
the whole planet.
Barbarism.
That's part of the male ego.
Well, that's part of the
Oh, that
problem.
left brain, right brain.
That
huh?
left brain, right brain,
Yeah, that's
and it's controlled by greed. There's no compassion in the equation.
that's right.
There's no humanity in the equation.
Going back to the book.
It's everything having to do with more, better, bigger, mine, not yours, at the expense of someone else.
Amen.
And it's unfortunate that we've allowed this to go on for eons. I mean, this is nothing new. Since the beginning of time, it seems like.
That's the difference between lust and love. Love
Amen.
is about lust is about self-gratification.
Right.
Love means you're giving. Lusting means you're getting, you're taking.
Let's do a
Yeah.
relationship show one day. We haven't
Oh,
done
yeah.
any relationship
yeah, we
shows.
have.
No. On that note, as I say,
On
the
that
yin and
note,
the yang.
it's all about God and love, and
Yes.
God
Stay
is
prayed
love.
up.
And as we always say here in the
Birds
Gilchrist
singing in the
Experience, if the God in me loves the God in you. Oh, wow. I got a whole minute left. Well, we'll do something with that some other
Yeah,
time. All right.
but,
But remember, next week we'll be back with some other interesting topic. Hopefully, we can read chapter 2 of the ancient
Secret of the Flower
Secret
of Life.
The Flower of Life.
Yes.
By
Which hopefully
Devalo Melchizedek, right?
Devour.
Because I like to do more on that show. Again, the God in me loves the God in you, and keep in tune to the Gilchrist Experience. We always bring you something interesting. Hopefully, we've all learned a little something today. All right? God bless.
Oh boy.
All right? Cheerio! Pip pip.
Ta-ta for now.
From Culpeper and Weatherspoon also. Ciao.
Ciao, Bella.